بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين الطيبين. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Inshallah, your ibadat worships have been accepted by Allah, and we all have the opportunity to make the most and the best of the blessings of this month. On the 20th day of this blessed month, after 20 days, after 19 days of fast, on the 20th day, the dua we have is as follows. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma aftah li fihi abwab al-janan wa aghliq anni fihi abwab al-niran wa waffiqni fihi litilawat al-Quran ya munzil as-sakinati fi qulub al-mu'minin. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a few things. The first is this: O Allah, iftah li fihi abwab al-janan. Open the gates of Janan, the gardens. Open the gates of paradise for me. Paradise, the gardens that we've been told of, and the descriptions we have of the different types of trees, and then having streams running through it that are either water, fresh, cool water, or streams of honey and milk and other streams, other springs. These descriptions that we have, there's something about a door and an opening to them. Those gates can either be open on one or they can be closed. Now, what is this trying to tell us, this particular dua, about the opening of the gates of paradise on one? If we look at the wording of the dua, we're saying that, oh Allah, open the gates of paradise, the gardens, on me now. In other words, it doesn't say that, oh Allah, open the gates of paradise in the hereafter for me. The way we usually understand it, paradise, gardens, and so on are in the hereafter. We have to go through this life, leave this world, be resurrected, and then you have the gates of paradise open to you, if we inshallah get to make it over there. And we have certain hadith and verses that may seem to conform with that understanding. But here what we're saying is, oh Allah, in this life, right here, today, in the month of Ramadan, open these gates. One way to understand it is, again, to try to explain it in a way where it goes along with the idea of paradise not being here, but paradise being in the hereafter. And so we're simply saying, oh Allah, open the gates, meaning prepare the steps, prepare me, allow me to do things that would allow the doors of heaven, paradise, to open up on me. In other words, when I do those things here, it doesn't actually currently open the gates of paradise to me, but rather it helps me develop certain things, develop the ability and the readiness to be where in the hereafter I would have the gates of heaven, the gates of paradise opened on me. That may be an understanding that some would like to agree with as well, but it seems that the dua is actually telling us that the gates are being opened right now. as we have other ahadith, possibly other du'as, that seem to suggest the same, that in the month of Ramadan, those gates are going to be open, and the gates of hell are going to be closed. So what is the opening and the closing of the gates? Either way, whichever the two explanations, whether we take the opening of the gates to be in this world, in this month of Ramadan, or the opening being in the hereafter, whichever of those we accept, the opening of the gates itself has to do with what we do that would have the gates open. In other words, doing what is right, doing and being involved with the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, performing good deeds, عمل الصالحات, if we look at the verses of the Holy Quran, those are going to cause the opening of the gates of paradise. And bad deeds, evil intentions, kufr, disbelief, rejecting God, these are what are going to open the gates of hell. So what we're saying here basically is, oh Allah, open the gates of heaven, paradise. I would like to go with the notion that it's here, as the ulama have mentioned. The opening of the gates of paradise happens here with the actions that we perform, with the good deeds that we perform, and we're able to continue with that. We're able to get away from what opens the gates of hellfire and start moving towards becoming a muhsin, which is someone that only good comes from. We can become that. And if we do that, then we have entered the gates of paradise, even though we may not see it in this world, and it will manifest in the hereafter, but we have actually entered paradise in this world. In fact, those who advance spiritually, those who are more active and have been able to progress further, they will see their paradise and others in paradise right here on earth. So Allahumma aftah li fiha abwab al-janan. Oh Allah, open those gates. Now, why do we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open those gates? If it has to do with action, it has to do with deeds. I am supposed to be opening those gates. Well, there's different explanations that we can probably think, in different ways we can word it. But one of the things that can be said is that realistically, and if we really look at who we are, what we have done, because of our actions, we are not at a situation, we are not at a position that would allow for the gates of paradise to open. But we're saying, oh Allah, although I don't deserve this, with my actions the gates of hell would be open. I'm asking you, oh Allah, to open those gates for me, regardless. Which of course doesn't mean He's going to open them without me doing things. But this means that although I have been moving in the other direction, you please open the gates of paradise for me, bring me into the right path, and allow me to do what's right, inshallah. وَأَغْلِقْ عَنِّي فِيهِ أَبْوَابَ النِّيرَانِ. Oh Allah, lock the doors of an-niran, fire. Lock the doors, close those gates, shut those gates. When we start progressing and we start getting involved in worship, servitude of God, praying, maybe even doing recommendations, waking up maybe for the night prayer, we haven't shut the gates of hellfire. You could have both of them still open, and God forbid we end up entering hell. What's going to lock the doors and the gates of hellfire is the ability to avoid sin, the combination of good deeds and bad deeds is going to be a very risky situation, and God forbid the bad deeds take over and we enter hellfire. But if we want that to be shut, the gate of hell to be shut, we have got to keep from and refrain from and completely avoid the sins, muharramat. We have to have that shut. Now we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that help, because it's very difficult to shut that gate. You keep wanting to avoid sins, you try for a day or two, and then, God forbid, we fall into the trap of the shaitan again. The door is still open. We try again, and then we slip again. We try again, and we keep doing this, we keep doing this, we keep doing it. We want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this, and seriously beg Him for it. For both. Doing the good deeds sometimes becomes very difficult, so opening that gate becomes difficult. And shutting the gates to hellfire becomes very difficult. If one has opened the gates to God's mercy, to paradise, and has shut the door to hellfire, and is continuing to move through the gardens of paradise and getting closer and closer, and at stations and positions that are closer to the divine, then, as we said, that in this world they will start feeling that they are in paradise, and that would be the dream that one would have. That's a dream, that's a wish to wish for. It's a great success to be able to shut the door of hellfire by refraining from sins completely. No sins committed. All obligations done. All, not just simply the wajibat and the obligations, but going beyond that and continuing to progress and keeping that door, the gate of paradise, wide open, inshallah. Now, it's interesting that in this context, when we're talking about the gates of paradise and the gates of hell, then what we ask next is وَوَفِّقْنِي فِيهِ لِتِلَاوَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. وَوَفِّقْنِي فِيهِ لِتِلَاوَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. Oh Allah, give me the tawfiq. Tawfiq is something that we come across in the du'as, in the verses of the Quran, in ahadith. What does it mean? It means there's different ways again that this could be put, and it's good to hear all those different ways, because gradually through hearing the different descriptions, the different explanations, it starts to make sense to it. One of the ways this could be put is that God bringing everything together. Sometimes you plan, I want to recite Quran today, and then what happens is that you receive a phone call and the conversation takes long. When the conversation is done, I forget about the recitation of the Quran and I get involved with other things, and then at the end of that day we look back and we remember that, oh, I was supposed to recite Quran, but I missed the opportunity. I didn't have things coming together to allow it. You want to recite Quran, you think you'll do so on your tablet, and when you open up your tablet you see an email. You start getting busy with that. You see something else. Things keep you busy. Conditions and circumstances coming together, your heart being ready, your mind being ready to read the Quran and benefit from it. That is tawfiq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides that. Of course, He doesn't haphazardly do that. He doesn't give the tawfiq to someone and strip it from someone else for no reason and without any reasons. What we do when the opportunity is provided to us is key in what's going to happen to us next time when we are put in that situation. If we have free time and we don't pick up the Quran and read it, we don't try to actually read, then when we plan for it, God says, okay, if you didn't want to, then now that you think you want to, I'll put you in a situation where you don't get to read. That's how it works. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq and for Him to bring things together for tilawatul Quran. See, one of the things, as we mentioned, bringing everything together for tilawatul Quran, for the recitation of the Quran. If one's mind and heart is there, it's very different than when you sit there in the month of Ramadan, you want to recite the Quran, and you just don't feel like it. You don't feel like you can benefit too much. The words are not making sense. Your mind is all over the place. Now I would say still continue reciting that, because in these different circumstances, Shaitan wants us not to read the Quran, as that is our example. If it's any other worship, he doesn't want us to do that. And the thought that, oh, this is not beneficial, my mind is not there, my heart is not there, is to keep us from continuing. No, continue reading. But the tawfiq we ask is that make that element come in as well, O Allah, and allow me that when I recite the Quran, my mind is there, my heart is there, I can benefit most. Your words actually speak to me. Your words actually come into my heart. So we should have that, asking for that tawfiq, and actually try to recite that Quran in this month. But looking at the context of it, it might be such. We remember a hadith here, and it's good to remind ourselves, and I'm sure many of us have heard this, and maybe this is why it's relevant to this context. It says that, the hadith says that in the hereafter, the Quran which is recited, verses that are recited, will cause one's elevation. In other words, you recite a verse, it causes you to elevate. Now that's all metaphoric and symbolic. In the context of these du'as, if the gates of paradise are open and we're trying to shut the gates of hellfire, which is a very important request we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just having the gates of paradise isn't the final request we have. Through the recitation of the Quran, what's going to happen is we're going to be able to progress and advance and move up. Simply getting our foot in the door and entering paradise shouldn't be our goal. What should be our goal is to progress so that we get and arrive at the highest ranks of paradise, inshallah. That may be why this particular dua is mentioned in the context that we're in. And the last thing we have is we address Allah, as we have in every one of these du'as. We ask Him for something, we request something or things, and then we call Him with certain attributes that are relevant to what we've asked. That's always taken into consideration, and we have to try to make sense of the dua or the verses of the Holy Quran in that particular context. In other words, the attributes are relevant to the requests that are being made. We're asking Him for some things, and we remind ourselves of an attribute that is relevant to that request. What is it that we have here? We have this: Ya munzil as-sakinah fi qulub al-mu'minin. O the one who brings tranquility and calm to the heart of the believers. Now, how is this relevant? If you look at, let me mention this briefly, this story that we have in the Holy Quran. Maybe it helps us understand this a bit better. In the time of the Prophet, the Battle of Hunayn, the verses of the Holy Quran describe what happened there. And what happened was, initially when the believers entered that split in the mountain and the enemies were ready for them, and they started suddenly attacking, the believers were very unstable, and they felt that they can't stay. The majority of them started running away from the battlefield. Now, those are circumstances that you're very nervous about what's happening. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the sakina, tranquility and calm, to the heart of the Holy Prophet, the believers that were with him, and they were steadfast, and they went on with the battle, and that caused the other believers to realize their mistake and give them a second chance, and they came over and they fought alongside of the Holy Prophet, and the believers were victorious in that battle. That's sakina, the tranquility at times of unrest, when the heart would be at unrest and one would be very nervous, very worried. Sakina, the calm, comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now here, if you look at the du'as, the request we made in this particular supplication, we're saying we want the door and the gate of paradise open, the gates of hellfire closed and shut on us, and we want the recitation of the Quran that helps us go to the better spots in the gardens of God, in the paradise, in the heaven that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And we call him by this title, Ya Munzil as-Sakina ala qulub al-Mu'minin. So it tells us that we're in the state of unrest because we are uncertain, the worry that we are going to enter hellfire, the worry not to be able to have the gates of paradise opened on us, the worry of not being able to elevate. One of the things, thoughts that really kills the person who comes and thinks about this is if one develops a love and an understanding, even a minimal love and understanding of not God, even the Ahlul Bayt, the Holy Prophet, the thought that in the hereafter, although I could be somewhere very near the Holy Prophet, where I would see him, I would converse with him, I would see Amir al-Mu'mineen, I would be with him, close to him. I can be like that, and there will be believers like that. On the Day of Judgment, I will watch those believers be in those positions, be near Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen shows love to them, and I am at a distance. That thought of not being able to get that close kills the person who is trying to get closer. So with all of these worries, what's going to happen? God, I'm very worried. God is going to bring that tranquility and that sakina to the heart. And that sakina doesn't come, it's not a painkiller that God gives us. Everything is actually moving in the wrong direction, but we get this sakina, this calm, this tranquility that we feel in our hearts, but there's no reality to it. In other words, we're moving towards hellfire and we feel calm. Well, that's not the way things are supposed to happen. That calmness is poison. You should feel worrisome. But that sakina should come, and we would ask for it, and we would call God by that name, that you're the one that provides this, because we want the sakina, the feel of calm, that the gates of paradise are open and they will not shut on us, and the gates of hell are shut and they will not open, and we are able to recite and elevate and get closer and closer to the Divine Himself, inshallah. We hope and pray that by the right and the truth of the Ahlul Bayt, God bestows all of these great requests that the Ahlul Bayt have taught us to us, inshallah, in this blessed month. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.